Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stories on Tape podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have Miss Julia Ewoldt, one of my very good friends, here with us today. Julia, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Yeah. So first, let's just give everyone a little taste. What would you say is your story? Just give us a little background.
My story, because this podcast is all about storytelling. So we're going to start from the beginning for me,
Perfect.
as far back as I really feel like going. I got into storytelling when I was actually in high school. Some opportunities arose for me to join the journalism club. So I actually wrote for the local newspaper while I was in high school. And then later when I was in high school, we had a radio station at school, which was really, really weird. You know how some schools have like pretend TV stations and it's really just an internal broadcast? Well, this radio station broadcast to the entire community. And we had radio shows every single day. We had to go report the weather, the news at the top of the hour, and we had to do station IDs. It was a full-blown radio station. And that's one of the ways that I got into storytelling as well. You know, that love and passion kind of grew as I went to college, and I transitioned more into television storytelling, which is a mixture of print and radio and then video combined. So it really took the skills I had learned previously and combined them into something new and something really fun and engaging.
Yeah, and so that's how we met. That's how we became good friends. We co-anchored a morning show in Jackson, Tennessee for 2 years together.
I want to say it was 2 years. It wasn't
Something
long
like
enough.
That.
Well, with
Agreed.
you, it was too long at the TV station, but not long enough with you, Josh.
Agreed. And so we were up and early, 4 a.m. We got to be at work together, so we got to see each other in the dark hours, our true selves, if you will. And we got to tell lots of stories. So I think my first thing would be, what to you makes a good story? How do you find a good story?
You know, since I transitioned into a new role at the University of Tennessee, I've actually been going and speaking to a lot of students, especially middle school students, about storytelling. And the things that I tell them are really, there's a formula to a good story. You can make a boring story a good story if you simply follow a good formula. And I start with the 5 W's and the H. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. If you answer those questions, you're more than likely going to have a good story. And you can't just stop at who, what, when. You got to get into the why and how of the situation. Another thing I tell them is stick to a formula. Someone does something. If you can narrow down your story into those 3 words, then you're going to be able to get to the point, make it concise, and make it enjoyable for people.
Yeah, and that's definitely, I feel like a lot of reporters will have that, because most of our stories had to be like maybe a minute and a half long at most.
Exactly. You don't have time to go weaving in and out and doing all sorts of weird things. Someone does something.
Definitely. And so how do you now in your job, as well as at the TV station, how do you find stories? What do you look for?
Finding stories, I think, starts with, and this is so funny, gossip. Ooh, you have to sit around, talk to people, hang out for a little while, and have them talk to you. Really get into it. I think that's a gift that both you and me have, is that people just tell us things. You don't ask for them to tell you these things, but all of a sudden they just start talking about your own. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I've seen that at my new job as well. And I think that's something that a lot of storytellers have, that gift of people feel comfortable telling their stories to them, gossiping with them, telling other people's stories to them, maybe saying something that you think, I should look into that a little bit more. And that is the birth of a new story.
Yes, exactly. We would get like messages all the time. Facebook is a huge place to find stories, and some gossip sometimes too. We get messages of like, I heard this going on, my person said this the other day, kind of thing. And so
tell me more.
Exactly. Yeah. Give me a little more. And so once you found that story, what then would you look for to kind of help tell it? Is there specific videos, specific images? Is there someone you would always want to talk to? What goes into then like putting the story together?
So the best way to tell a story, especially when you get that little idea and you're like, what can I do with that? What can I, expand on this with, is getting someone to talk to you about it on the record, on camera, whatever medium you're using, recording for radio, something like that, and making the story about a person. So if you, for example, have a story that's very like numbers friendly, for example, city raises budget 10%, you look for, who is this going to affect? Talk to one of those people, because it goes back to the outline of that story. Someone does something. You need a person for it to revolve around. Humans don't really tend to care about news and stories that are not human-centric. So you need to be able to make that happen.
That's a great point. Yes, definitely finding someone that maybe didn't make the change but is being impacted by the change. And I think that was something that was like really put in our brains, was always try to find someone that is being affected by the decision, not just someone making the decision.
Yeah, and that goes back to a lot of different things. I mean, if you hear about something that's happening in a new park, you go find someone at the park, find someone who's excited about the park. If you want to tell a story about how poverty is affecting people, find those people, talk to them. And human-centric stories are one of the keys to good storytelling.
Definitely going to get someone's attention a lot faster than just saying, budget's been raised 10%.
Exactly. Yeah. And the gossip behind it too. You gotta listen. You gotta talk to people. You can't just go to a city official or to someone important and say, so tell me about this. You gotta ease them in.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
you gotta warm them up a little bit. Otherwise they're like, why should I talk to you?
Yes. And you brought up another good point. Listening is a big part of telling stories, because if you don't hear what someone's saying, then you're probably missing the real story.
Absolutely. If you're looking for one specific thing, that's not going to do any good, because you're missing the other 85% of it.
Right. Is there something that you think always makes a good story, or are there different kinds of stories, and those different kinds of stories need different things?
Josh, I'm telling you, the best stories start with the gossip. The stories that people I have found that care about are things that have been like mutterings in the community for a long time, and you're finally able to say it out in public. A great example of that would be these major issues at a FedEx hub in West Tennessee. I mean, people have been talking about this for 2 years, 3 years. They didn't get their packages. If they got them the food inside, because people order food online now, food inside was rotten, or their iPhone didn't show up, or this, that, the other. It was ridiculous. Hundreds of Facebook posts about it. And it started with gossip. And I was able to contact FedEx and talk to them about this. And that story had thousands of shares on Facebook, because people wanted something official to come from it. And so I talked to people who had been affected by it. And I was able to get down to the point of the 5 W's and the H, and the someone does something. FedEx messes up orders. Another example, and it starts with gossip again, because, you got to gossip with the people who are in charge. That is one of the, because when you start doing that, then they're going to come to you on their own free will. You don't have to corner them or anything like that. So other examples would be crime stories. Those start with gossip. Do you hear what happened down here? Like, I heard they found a body. Starting with that and moving into the someone does something. So-and-so killed so-and-so, or so-and-so stole this. Starting with the gossip leads you to the stories that people care about.
And that's the other thing with storytelling, especially in news. We do have to prove. We do have to have other people to say, yes, this happened, with police, the mayor, other officials have to be able to say.
Sources. Absolutely.
Yes. Find those sources. Definitely keep them on their toes a little bit, but also have that relationship with them for sure. And then obviously, yes, be able to say, yes, they told me this as well, and therefore we can tell the story.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, that goes back to some of my favorite stories that I've done in news, starting with that gossip and working it into a real story. You know, you get a call from someone at 9 a.m. saying, "Ooh, there's a body in the middle of the road. You better come down here." You're like, "Okay, I believe you. I trust you. I've built a good relationship with you. Yes, I am on my way." And I mean, that's one of my favorite stories. I hate it. I have mixed feelings about this story. But
Yes.
I show up on this crime scene in a very small town, and all the person's family is there. I'm talking like 30 people are surrounding this body that had not been covered up yet.
Yeah.
Lots of feelings about that too. And the wife of the person who has died is just screaming, crying, as they should. I mean, that's a very traumatic event. And I'm thinking to myself, if one person talks to me on camera, I can get out of here. I have got every single thing I need, and I do not want to be here a second longer, because the longer you are there, the more likely you are to get screamed at or told to go away or something bad happening. So get out, go. And so I'm trying to get someone to talk to me, and eventually the wife walks up to me, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the time. I am going to be screamed at. But no, she's crying even more, and I am mortified. I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, this is awful. I do not know what to do. Her husband is killed laying in front of her. And this woman hugs me. And I just, because that's not reporter hug. I'm an intruder in this situation, right? And so I'm just like there, I don't know what to do. And I end up getting my interview, getting out of there, getting the heck out of there. The next day, I look on the mugshot report. There she is, the wife, on the mugshots. And I said, what? And
yeah.
I called the official that I had talked to before, and I was like, excuse me, sir, what is going on here? And he said, well, haven't you heard? She was arrested for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. And I'm like, excuse me?
Oh.
I hugged her. And I immediately wanted to go shower, but I did not have time to do that. So, like wash that sin off of me. But turns out she and her very young teenager boyfriend had conspired to kill her husband through a text message, and the teenager was caught on the neighbor's surveillance video. I mean, there's no backing out of that one. But I just had to take a second because flashbacks. So gross.
Yeah.
But I mean, it started with the gossip, kind of, hey, you should get down here. I'm here and this is going on. And turns out to be a very interesting story.
Yeah, a completely different story almost. Like, and I think that is something we discovered a lot too, was like you'd start a story thinking one thing, and by the end of the week, it's either branched into 3 different stories, or the story you started has completely flip-flopped and isn't even recognizable anymore.
No, that would happen all the time, where you go for one thing and, well, I guess that's not happening anymore. Got to change plans. And that's another key to storytelling is you got to work with what you got. You can't tell a story and just leave a bunch of blank screen on the TV.
Right.
Or just write a couple of sentences and be like, this is all we know. You have to tell them what you do know. Tell them what you do not know. And sometimes if you went for one thing and it changed to something else, write about the something else.
Definitely. Yes. And I like what you said about writing what you don't know as well, because that is just as important as saying we reached out to them, we did everything we could, but no one's getting back to us or no one's telling us anything. And so this is all we're able to tell you right now.
Exactly. And then
Hmm.
you update the situation because storytelling is a very fluid. Things aren't set in stone, and it's almost like science. You learn one thing, oh, and this might change. So you need to tell the people that this has changed. You're upfront about it.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really beautiful part of it because it can be so different from where you started to where it went.
Yes, yes. Um, so as we said earlier, we have spent many mornings together, many days together. Is there a favorite story you have that involves the two of us? I can think of one off the top of my head. It was on my time hop the other day. It was we used to do like we would celebrate like national days on the calendar on air, and it was National Hat Day. And we had a couple months ago before this, we had Lindsay Dawkins on to talk about the Turkey Day 5K that happens in Jackson
Yes.
every year. And she gave us those turkey hats. And
And gosh,
so,
we have to explain. It's not just a turkey on hat. This was a felt brown. It looked like a baker's hat almost.
right,
Like went all
right.
the way tight around your head. Then
Legs hanging down.
the legs and the big old turkey feathers on top. Like this wasn't just your run of the mill ball cap. This was
Right, right,
an
right.
obnoxious hat.
Right. And so we had just had them back at like in the office for a while. And I was like, oh, perfect idea. And so during one of the commercial breaks, I had like run back there and like secretly brought it. And as I was telling everyone it was National Hat Day, I put it on, and your face, you were just like, what is happening right
I
now?
had
What is
second
going on?
embarrassment.
But you got to keep, when it's 6 o'clock in the morning and you have been up for 4 hours already, you're like, what can I
But I think
do?
you had more secondhand embarrassment for me than I ever did for you.
There are a few times in the morning where I was
I
like,
consistently embarrassed myself.
but you're a
Consistent.
good sport about it.
That is the one thing I've learned how to do.
You talked about some of the reporting stories. Are there any other stories that come to mind, either like that you grew up hearing or that you have done at your new job recently, or anything like that that kind of might stick with you for a while that you'll pass on or that you'll use when you go talk to like middle schoolers, like you said?
That's a really tough question because when you become a storyteller, everything is a story. You look back on your childhood, you look back on your young adulthood. I guess I'm kind of still in that. I mean, like more like high school.
Yes.
And you start narrating these stories in your head. But I think most of my stories and most of my like fond memories really come from working at BBJ with you,
Mm-hmm.
because that's when I really, really went into my love for storytelling. And one of these stories is, see, you brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and I've been thinking about it. It's been living rent free in my
Oh
head
no.
because the secondhand embarrassment. So this has happened more than once.
Oh
I don't know if
no.
I've told you that it's happened more than once now. But I was driving home from running errands one day, and I was at a stoplight, and it was red for me and it was green for everyone else, and no one is going. And I'm like, why aren't you going? Go. What is going on? Go.
Julia has things to do.
Well, sometimes when you're in Jackson traffic, you're just like, and because it's not normal traffic. It's not like there's a bunch of cars on the road.
Right.
There's a bunch of dumb people on the road. So I was banging the table on that one. And so I'm honking my horn like, move your booties. Josh.
Mm-hmm. Why weren't they moving, Julia?
You know why they weren't moving.
I do. Are you going to tell everyone?
Procession.
How long did it take you to realize that it was a funeral procession happening, and that's why no one was moving?
Too long.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I saw the hearse.
Yeah. And how did that make you feel?
Bad.
I can just imagine everyone around you in their cars like, What is her problem? Like, does she not
What
see?
a B word. But Josh, the worst part is it happened again.
I was gonna say, I think I only knew about when did it happen again?
In my hometown. I was driving through to get my hair done or something, and I get to a stoplight. Same deal. I don't know how I didn't put two and two together, but no one was going. But this time it's worse. I didn't honk at them. I just drove through the stoplight and almost got hit by the hearse. Is this a Southern thing where everyone stops for funeral processions? Is that a thing?
No, I think it's a thing.
Is this nationwide?
I hope so.
I don't know. Because I had another thing. This is the third one. Me and funeral processions just don't. We do not get along.
Did you grow up with your parents like stopping for funeral processions?
Yeah, because we lived right next to a funeral home.
Okay.
I don't know. I
don't know. Julia has places to be and things to do.
This is the question to our podcast for the end of the day. But the third time that I have had an issue with one, I was driving back from a retreat. I was going through Nashville, I-40. There's like, it's like a 10-lane interstate when you're getting out of Nashville. Like, it's a lot. But we're going 50 miles an hour on the interstate.
Oh.
And there's no traffic. And I'm like, what is going on? Why am I going 50 miles an hour when I should be going, like 80?
Right.
And I finally passed enough cars and I was like, oh no, it's a funeral procession. But what do you do when the funeral procession is on the interstate? Do you pass them? Do you have to drive 50 miles an hour until they eventually veer off? Because let me tell you, this was for 20 minutes I was behind them. Like, it wasn't you're getting on for one exit type of situation. Right. What do you do?
That's a great question. I've never been behind.
That is so completely off topic for today, but those are my stories that I don't know if I like to tell. I think I like to tell around you.
And when I say Julia told me this the first time and I couldn't breathe because I was laughing so hard, I truly mean it. Like, she told me this story and I had no words. There was no story to tell. That was the story. And I think I actually told it on air when we came back from a commercial break one time.
I bet all of those old people who watched us judged me so hard.
I bet they did. I'm sure we got a few comments about it too.
I'm sure they were, very upset because, they also told us how they felt about every single thing that we did.
Yes.
But I guess that's part of our personalities, going back to the storyteller personality of being the type of person who listens, talks, and people could just share what they think around us.
That's very true. It's very true.
Did. But getting back on topic, that let's do our little report with the funeral processions. So Julia gets mad at procession. See, it gets right down to the point. Sure, I expanded on it, but there wasn't all these flip-flopping around type of situations. There you go.
Julia, I need that on a t-shirt. Julia gets mad at processions. Thank you.
I just don't know what to do. I need a rule book, Josh.
I vote you stop and let the funeral procession go by, but that's just me.
No, but I didn't know.
So now thinking to the next generation of storytellers coming up. Granted, we are only in our late 20s, so we are still very much young storytellers, but the next generation, kids in high school, kids in college, we've talked about the W's and the H's, the someone does something. Is there anything else that you've learned or that you have kind of discovered in college or after or graduating that you might pass on to kind of help these next storytellers coming up?
Yeah, so often in storytelling, we say cite your sources. Yes, absolutely cite your sources. Know that you can have different types of sources. There's the video that you get from your interview. That's one type of source. Another source is what you see with your own eyes. It doesn't have to be so-and-so says it looks like this. No, you saw that it looks like this. You saw the fire. Another type of source is public records.
Mm.
And you can search those on your own. So be sure to look at different types of sources for your storytelling, because a good story, as well as getting to the point, answering the questions you need, is going to be well-rounded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you definitely want both sides, or as many sides as the story has.
As many sides, yeah, and as many sources as possible, because when you cite your sources and combine a lot of different sources, it lets people know that you did your due diligence.
Just what do you love about storytelling? What makes you want to keep doing it?
I grew up loving history and going to national parks all across the country. And every time I went to history class when I was in college, it was story time, you know? Like, I get to sit here and listen to stories. Sure, I'm taking notes furiously, but it's story time. It's so much fun. And when you get to be able to tell stories, you're a part of history. And you're the people who are going to be having story time with the next generation and leaving your mark.
I love that. I love that. And I think that's something I've come to learn is you can find stories in just about anything, whether it is a class in college, whether it is you just see people walking down the street who just look different than what you're used to, or speak differently than you're used to, or, you know, just do things not wrong, just differently. And it's so fun. I love getting to talk to people and just hear where they've come from, what they do, why they do it. And so why do you tell stories?
Because I want to tell history, and because I want to, you know, be that record, be that source of record, and collect this information. And so that people have a connection to why things are the way that they are. I do a lot of science articles now, which is really funny because I've never liked science, but here I am. And when you can connect that science article to a person, it becomes so much more engaging and so fun to listen to. And you start to put all these dots together and you become almost a historian.
Yes. And it also helps that your dad's a history teacher, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So you've grown up with that.
Yep. That's right, Josh.
Yes.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing your information, sharing your stories. I can't wait for other people to hear them. I think they're going to love it. Is there anything else that you can think of that you want people to know?
I think that's it for right now. But if I think of something else, I'll be sure to come back on your podcast.
Perfect. I think we'll have to make that happen. We'll tell more stories for sure.
Talk to you soon, Josh.
All right. Bye. Thanks so much for watching this episode of the Stories on Tape podcast. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Stories on Tape Pod. And if you have a storyteller you think should be in a future episode or have a story you want to tell, email me at storiesontapepod@gmail.com. Can't wait to share more stories with you.